Yeah, well, we
Okay, I'll do that. I can do it, yeah. I'll do that.
whatever.
Yeah, thanks.
Hi, everybody. So welcome to Upstairs.
Don't worry about
and
anything I'm gonna say.
welcome to this wonderful event where Jason Andrews is going to be in conversation with Connie Bostic. Now, Connie Bostic needs no introduction, and seeing her with all her friends is so beautiful. And this retrospective has been the most amazing thing. People have loved it, and they keep coming back, and we're just so thrilled that this could happen. So welcome, Connie, and I'm going to introduce Jason, because everybody knows you, but it seems to me almost everybody also knows Jason, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce him for those of you who don't. He's an independent curator and writer living in New York. He's the co-founder of Artist Estate Studio, LLC, which has been instrumental in shaping the landscape of artist estate management, which is really, really important. And he's managing several estates right now, Elizabeth Murray's estate, and Jack, I'm going to forget this again. Tworkoff.
You got
Tworkoff. So Jason, in 2019, curated Appalachia Now, which was that wonderful interdisciplinary survey of contemporary art in Southern Appalachia. He did that for the Asheville Museum of Art. And he's done a number of shows for the Black Mountain College Museum and Art Center. He first, and this is interesting, because he first met Connie at the annual conference that Black Mountain College and Museum and Art Center does every year. And he met her in 2009 and has really been a fan ever since. And I want to thank Jason because he helped support this wonderful book that was published, which is available for purchase. And Jason also wrote one of the essays in here. So, that's all I need to say. So I'm going to welcome the two. Okay.
Welcome to the Connie Bostic fan club.
Yeah.
I'm your unanointed president. And I think we all could, any one of us could be up here today, following your work, falling in love with your work, falling in love with you and your personality, and all of the amazing stories of your life that come through in the paintings and the work, relentlessly and purposefully, I think, is good to say. Of all the artists that I've come to know and appreciate and fall in love with, Connie not only is one of the most giving and supportive. I like to think that Appalachia Now exhibition would never have been what it was without Connie, without my introduction to Connie, and whether the artists that I got to meet through Connie's introductions in 2016, 17, 18, 19, endlessly. A big part of that, huge part of that. But we're here really to try to take a good look at this amazing survey. All the credit to the curators who organized this. I mean, the selection and the installation here, just amazing. I want to start. Are you ready? We did practice. And we didn't plan. I want to talk about Miss Hill. I want to talk about that elementary school teacher that gave you the permission that you needed.
Right, she showed, I guess I was in the 4th grade, and I grew up in Spindale. And for those of you who've never been there, don't go, you won't like it. At any rate, there was no art there was no music, there was no dance, there was no theater, there was nothing. We had a movie theater and a bowling alley, and that was it. So I was in the 4th grade, and the teacher, Miss Hill, showed us 3 or 4 reproductions of famous paintings. One of them was one of the windmills from the Dutch Golden Age, which was beautiful. And one of the others was Rosa Bonheur's Horse Fair. And it just stopped my heart. And I still had no idea about that painting until just like, 15, 20 years ago, when I finally saw it for real for the first time and realized those damn horses were life-size. So it's like a big picture. I'd have been much more impressed had I known that. But anyhow, that changed everything for me. I knew there was something out there that was not in Spindale. So
Amazing.
it was amazing.
Great story. And then I want to talk about you grew up with your in your grandfather's home,
Yeah,
right?
my parents, right.
And your grandfather was the local sheriff.
He was chief of police.
Oh, chief of police.
Yeah, very important.
So those dinner conversations, or what you were observing going on societally, must have been also an early influence. You were seeing more than.
Oh, it was politics, 3 meals a day. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, we had politics. And he was elected. His position was an elected position, so politics were really, really important. And that's what we had, 3 meals a day, politics. And so I got to be a political junkie really early in life, and have just now gotten to the point where I can't do that anymore. I just can't do it. But that's how I grew up. I grew up hearing about what was going on, and I didn't always understand the way it was being presented to me at my home, and I didn't always understand how it was being presented in the town where I lived, because sometimes it didn't make any sense the way it was presented. So I worried about that.
And as a child, were you doing drawing? Did you have any access to training?
No, there was nothing. I had notebook paper and pencils, and I drew a little bit, but there was no particular interest in that, and no particular impetus toward doing anything other than just playing with it, you know.
And then you moved.
And
And
then
then you arrived into Asheville. It's such an amazing story, because when I first came for the Black Mountain College conference, there's something that really happened when I saw you and the twinkle in your eye, and you came and listened to my talk on Jack Tworkoff and Franz Klein and Stefan Volpe, and your amazing sort of support of that. Okay, but that's saying more about me than you. So Asheville, moving to Asheville, coming to Asheville, and entering the politics here. I mean, there.
I did not. Moving to Asheville was like a very big deal to me, because the one thing we did have in Spindale was a library. And the one thing that I did find in that library when I was about 14 was Look Homeward Angel. And I was just mesmerized. I memorized page after page after page in that book. It was so important to me. And when the opportunity to move to Asheville came, I was elated. I was so excited, because this was the beginning of it all for me. And so I had never imagined being able to live in Asheville, but it was just a very big deal to be able to move here. And I was very excited about moving here. And then when the opportunity came to actually do something for the new Visitors Center, I was so excited about being able to do that piece. So excited about it. So,
have you all seen the piece that she has at the Visitors Center for the Tom Wolfe? Yeah. You've got to see it. It's really amazing. It's one of the things I get to see when you come into Asheville. You go by and see Connie's piece. It's fantastic. But there were politics here too. I mean, there was,
Oh, yeah.
you grew up in a sort of a societal thing that, you know, you can't sing and dance your way through life, or you can't be an artist, don't be an artist.
No.
A woman can't be an artist.
No.
You want to talk a little bit about that? I mean,
Well, I was really interested in doing this, and I wanted to do it so badly, but I had never, in my generation, a woman had to have male permission to do anything. You had to have permission from a man to do it, and I never got that. So when I moved to Asheville, I really still wanted to do this, and I decided I would go take one drawing class at UNCA. I ended up being the world's worst dilettante. I took everything you can imagine. I took all kinds of classes, and if I was taking a painting class and I was doing well, halfway through I'd quit because I knew I couldn't do that. I couldn't do it. And finally, after a number of years of playing around over there, they got a new person out of Western Carolina to direct the program out there, and he encouraged me to do what I wanted to do and gave me more than permission. He encouraged me to do what I wanted to do, and it just changed everything for me. So, thank you, Robert Godfrey, wherever you are tonight.
what was his name again?
Robert Godfrey. He's in Hudson,
Yeah.
currently moving his paintings from one barn to another. So,
The first painting we see when you come into this is a self-portrait. And can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, it's a wonderful painting with we've all seen it. You're looking right at us
well,
with a Victorian home behind you.
Yeah, that's
It
my
feels
house.
like an entry into something.
Yeah, well, that house is very important to me. I found that house. I promised my husband when we moved here that I wouldn't even look for a house to buy for the first year. And we'd been here maybe 5 months. When I was driving down 74, came around the curve and could see that house in the distance. And from the highway, I said, that's my house. And it just was. And it had huge holes in the floors and the ceilings and the walls. It was just a total wreck. And the people who owned it had already hired a bulldozer to knock it down. Because it was in such bad, they'd been trying to sell it forever and nobody would buy it. So here comes dumbass. I'll buy that. Yeah, I did. And there were lots of times in the winter when I sort of almost regretted it, but not quite. So,
And that's the house you're still in now.
yep, love it. They'll take me out in a box. That's it.
I remember having tea with you one day when the tree came through the front.
Yeah, that was sort of a bad situation.
That was bad. We had a good time though. And you didn't care. You just kind of.
What are you gonna do? You know, you just get on with it. So, I was peeling one of those purple things. What do they call those purple things? The big purple things. Eggplant, yeah. I was peeling an eggplant. I heard this big noise, and I didn't know what it was, so I just kept peeling the eggplant. And when I finished, I thought, maybe I ought to go check. So I walked out to the front porch, and there was no front porch. It was gone. So.
That was a big tree.
It was a big tree. I still miss that tree. It was a great tree.
And then you were able to set up a studio down the road, not
Oh, yeah,
so many
that's
years
right.
after.
Yeah. When we moved there, there was a man in that building who had a welding shop, and he lived in the mobile home next door, and he fished, and he welded, and he drank. Not necessarily in that order. And I think he probably gave my boys their first beers. But, because they liked to hang out with him, with Harold. And so Harold died, and his stepdaughter put a big sign on the front of the building for sale. And I had a little show down in Florida, and I had decided to take the granddaughters with me. They were all small then. We were all going to go down to Florida for a week or so, and drove past and I saw the sign that said for sale, and I was just devastated. I thought, oh, it'll be gone before I get back. That would be perfect. And the last painting I had made, before that, I had to paint on the floor because the ceilings in the space I was working were so low, it wouldn't stand up. So I was just desperate for a better studio space, and I thought, okay, all I need is like a painting wall down one side and a toilet and a sink in the back corner. That's all I need. And I knew it didn't have any floors. I knew it was dirt floors. It just, but I thought this would be great. I so love it, but it'll be gone. But we got back and it was not gone. And so I called the woman up and bought the building, and my son's a builder. And thank God he was able to do it in his, not spare time, but when he wasn't getting paid for something else. And it took him 3 years in part-time ways to do it, but he got it done, and that's a fabulous studio, and I'm so lucky to have it, so lucky.
That's the studio where I got to meet you, or actually you invited me finally.
Yeah.
She was working on the cemetery paintings that you see up here. And I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I thought, Connie, you went, okay. This artist is obsessed with death, and I didn't really know how to talk about it. So I remember, I don't know if you remember, but I remember the conversation because I focused on the flowers. And then it kind of dawned on me a little bit. I thought, she sneaks these things in to her, these really gripping stories, these stories that she tells us, and she disguises them and lures you in with that almost like a bucolic scent in your way. You're drawn in by the texture of the paint, you're drawn in by the color, and then you really start to unravel it. And I think I remember also the abortion piece was something you were still kind of figuring out because you were still working on the portraits.
Yeah.
And that was hard for me because I've never really, I deal with mostly abstract art and these narrative trains that she paints that are driving at you, sounding a horn. Let's talk about the abortion piece.
Okay.
How did that come? What was the impetus to begin that?
I guess I was about 13, and I was in bed with pneumonia. I was really sick. This was like just at the beginning of penicillin. So I still remember everybody being excited about me getting a shot of penicillin. But I was really sick, and the phone rang, and my grandmother was whispering. So I knew something had happened that was pretty serious. And it turns out that the sister of my best friend, who was older than we were, had died. And I didn't know what was going on, but she had had an illegal abortion and had died on her way home. She was what was known in those days as a good girl. She finished high school, she got a job at the local Five and Dime, and she got a promotion from that Five and Dime to doing bookkeeping at the one in Spartanburg, which of course was a big deal because that was a city, And so she's doing that, and she comes home on weekend to go to church with her family. And that weekend she didn't make it home. She had gotten pregnant by her boss, who was of course married. And I thought about this. The really horrible thing about it was that in the newspaper, it was a little tiny town, and the newspaper carried this huge thing, like 2 full columns on the front page, covering this young woman's death. And it was so unnecessary to put the family through that. It was just so unnecessary. And so that had a real impact on me. So I kept those newspaper clippings all these years, and I went back to them after all the Roe versus Wade stuff got really hot and heavy, and looked at them and reread it and thought, you know, we're going right back there, and sure enough, here we are. But I counted, and in the newspaper, I counted the number of men who were involved in this young woman's death. And so those are portraits of the men who were involved in some way. And it was just amazing how many there were. And it was just such a sad, sad, awful thing. It was so unnecessary start to finish. So that's how it came about, and that's why it was such an important thing. I contacted the young woman's sister because I wanted to do the little photo album out front of the little girl growing up, because I felt like that would be a really important part of the piece. And she sort of went berserk and said that she felt like her sister had gone to hell for sinning, and was not the least bit interested in my seeing the photographs. But I had a good friend who was born the same year as that girl, and so she gave me her snapshots, and so that's what I used for the photo album. So it worked out.
I mean, it's almost sort of a cathartic thing for you to work through, but every time I see it, it's gripping. It's like a Goya. It's like one of the great Goyas that we have for our present day. And I think the voice that you've been able to carry through your art and the stories, you're a storyteller. I mean, you're an amazing storyteller. Just have dinner with her. But it's something that is important for us to be seeing, and
Well,
you know. Okay, so Calamity, Calamity Jane. I always thought that was very much like self-portraits.
I
Do you-
would never have had the guts to do the stuff she did. Never.
No?
No. She was a lot braver than I could ever be. She was just, I don't know. Okay, so I used to go to flea markets all the time. I love flea markets. And I went to the flea market all the time, and I went to the flea market one day, and I found this little book. It was a little book about this big, and it was called Calamity Jane's Letters to Her Daughter. And I snapped it right up and took it home, and I read these letters, and it was really touching, and I put it away, and that was the end of it. So years later, I remembered that little book, and I thought that was interesting, I'm gonna find that. I couldn't find it. I searched for weeks looking for that little book. And it took me several months to finally lay hands on it again. And by that time, I had done enough research about Calamity to know that she did not write any letters to her daughter because she was illiterate. She couldn't read or write. And these letters had been written by a woman who was a con artist. And she was traveling around places giving lectures, being paid to give lectures about being Calamity Jane's daughter. And so she made some money doing that for quite some time, but it finally caught up with her, and she got, debunked and all that. But I just got more and more interested in who this woman really was and what the real story was. And the more I learned, the more fascinated I became. She left home, as far as we can tell, when she was like 13 or 14 years old, just a baby. And she learned to ride and shoot better than most men. I mean, she was really, really very accomplished with all that stuff. But she also was prone to alcohol. She drank a little. Actually, she drank quite a lot. And she ended up working in brothels, even in the ones that were called, what they call the really horrible ones, that were called, pig farms or something, really an awful name for these awful places where these women worked. And she went through all these phases in her life of doing different things. But if there was an outbreak of some sort of horrible contagious disease and people needed nursing care, she would go in and do it. She would risk catching whatever it was to go take care of people. And she did that over and over with adults and with children her whole life through. And so that was a very important part of what is largely forgotten about her. But when she died fairly young. She was in her 50s when she died. But she died in a little town about 12 miles away from Deadwood, where she had spent most of her life. It turns out that the undertaker in Deadwood had smallpox or something when he was a child, and she had taken care of him and nursed him through that, and he had not forgotten it. So he picked up her body, brought her back to Deadwood, laid her out in a really elaborate white coffin, just beautiful white dress, big thing over the top of the coffin, just really, really elaborate looking thing. And he realized that the women in the town, none of whom, of course, would ever have spoken to her on the street, were sneaking into the funeral home and snipping off bits of her hair for souvenirs. So he made a wire cage, put it over her head so those women couldn't get to her. So that was her end. And
were these the paintings, were they from memory? Did you have did you have a photograph that you were working for, or these were things that you were?
Yeah, I worked from photographs. There weren't very many photographs, so but I worked from photographs, and I really enjoyed doing that series. I really enjoyed doing it, and we actually went out there. My husband was not always tolerant of my of my art projects, but he did enjoy going out to Deadwood and going with me to see where Calamity had been. And we visited her cemetery, and I've got a great painting of her grave, and she was buried next to Wild Bill Hickok, with whom she was madly in love her whole life. And of course he was very fastidious and had never gone near her. But that's where she's buried, right next to him. So
I know, it's a remarkable series where we see the paintings, we see collage, developing all these ideas and presenting this figure through I was drawn to the serigraph that you did and then painted over it and altered it. One of the works on paper. And I love that sort of expressionistic color portrait of her too. It's like on fire. It's great. You've seen a lot of tragic events happening all over the world. You see the flooding, Katrina here. You see Standing Rock here. And you're in this little Fairview, studio.
we call it Fairbois.
Fairview. You've given yourself license to actually, it feels to me like you own these things. Like these are things that you've experienced. These are, you're telling these stories through almost as if you were there. The perspectives that you place the viewer in makes us feel like we're there. When these events had happened, you want to talk a little bit about, let's talk about the big snow painting, standing. How did this get into the studio, get into your mind and get into you so you had to get it out?
It was just, that whole thing was so, these people have been through this for centuries, over and over and over again. They're pushed aside, and their needs are always at the bottom of the stack, and they're just abused in every imaginable way ever since our forefathers set foot on this land, we've done this to them, and it doesn't stop. It just does not stop. And so there they are, all of them out there, but nothing changes. Nothing changes. And it's just like the saddest thing in the world. And that whole thing was, it was a really terrifying experience. And those people were so brave to go out there and do what they did and go through being out there in the cold, and I think they knew from the beginning it was hopeless, but they were going to do it anyway. They did it anyway, but they were up against impossible odds. So
your work asks hard questions, like this painting here called America with a question mark. You know.
well, there we are in all our glory.
Yeah.
In all our glory.
Yeah. I want to open this up to other questions that people, observations that other people have had, or questions you might have for Connie. Alice.
I would like Connie to talk about Zone 1 Contemporary Gallery in downtown.
Oh yeah, Zone 1. Let's hear about Zone 1.
Okay. Good times and bad times. Zone 1 was great. Zone 1 was just great. I got to look at so much stuff by so many artists. And that's the thing that I really miss, is being able to see so much artwork. Because people would come in and bring their stuff, and it was always so great to get to see stuff. And 9 times out of 10, when I looked at it, I knew that I'd never show it. And sometimes because it wouldn't be appropriate for me to show it, and other times when I knew it just wasn't ready yet, just needed to cook longer. But it was always so good to get to see it, and to see what people were thinking and what they were doing. It was always just so interesting, and I enjoyed that so much, and I really miss that.
It took some moxie to just decide I'm going to open a gallery. It was like for everyone that doesn't know, it's, you know, it was one of the biggest it was the contemporary center that brought a lot of artists outside of the region into the region. Robert Mapplethorpe and Keith Haring are just two of the people that, you know, you would bring in.
Well, yeah, there was that, and then there was Kenneth Nolan, and there was what's his name? With the sound suits.
Nick Cave.
Nick Cave,
Yeah.
Nick Cave. And that was a great show. That was a really great show. So anyhow, there were lots of good times, and it's funny how the whole thing happened, though, because my studio was on the 3rd floor of that building, and
this was in Bitmore. On Bitmore.
Things get all scrambled up now. My studio was on the 3rd floor, and I was happy as a clam, just being up there doing my stuff. And on the 1st floor, we rented it to somebody, and they disappeared. And people kept coming in and wanting to rent it and have it be a gallery. And it was all gonna be trash, and I just couldn't bear it. I wasn't gonna walk through that to get home every day. And so finally my husband put his foot down and he said, all right, if you aren't gonna let anybody else do it, you have to do it yourself. And so that's how the gallery came to be. I was just railroaded into it, so I had no intentions of ever doing that.
And when did you start? When was that? That was
I don't know.
87, I think.
Was it?
It was, yeah.
So you're better at that.
I think so.
I think about that.
Somebody
87, I think. Yeah. Another question?
I have one.
Oh.
I was just thinking about the music hall that
Oh, that was
preceded.
before.
The musical?
Preceded the art.
Oh, the musical. Oh, yeah. Let's talk about gay bars.
Oh, now we're having fun. Now we're really having fun. 6 months was the best fun I ever had in my whole life. The first 6 months was so much fun. George was not happy. He was really not happy.
He really thought he was gone off.
There was nobody making biscuits in the morning. He was not happy. He was not happy. but I had the best time of my life. I had the best time. And actually somebody who was a patron of that place called me up on the phone today. Haven't seen him in years, but he called up today to see how I was doing. So I made friends that I'll never, ever, ever forget or love. Not stop, or stop loving.
It's great.
So it was a great time. It's a great time.
Dancing, disco.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. I can't say that I love the music today, but it was great at the time. So.
Another question here.
And this isn't really a question, and I'm not sure Connie knows this, but the upstairs owes a huge amount of love and gratitude to Connie, because when I moved here in 1991, the upstairs had been defunct for a year. And so a bunch of us got together and said, we've got to revive this, but we were all new to the area, we didn't know any artists. So then I was up in Asheville and I walked into Zone 1, and Connie and I have been friends ever since, but she told me who the artists were and who we needed to be exhibiting. And anyway, we were running things, and she's been a wonderful advisor to the gallery ever since.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I mean, she'd grab my arm and she'd say, "This person has to be in this show." and then she wouldn't hesitate. She'd pick up her phone. The cell phone was the worst thing that could happen to me when she got a cell phone, because she would just have these people on, and here you're talking to them. I never regretted it. Never did. I never did. Another question? Is there anything you wanted to talk to us about? A deep secret that you want to...
Oh dear, let's see, let me think. What can I say that would shock everybody?
We've all heard it, no.
Oh dear, okay, the first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to thank everybody here, because the staff and the board here have been just amazing. They've made this a really good experience for me, and I know it's a lot of hard work to do this. And if you've never run a gallery, or if you've never been a part of one, there's a lot more to it than just getting dressed up and going to a reception. There's a lot more to it than that. And so show your appreciation to the people who do this, because it's really, really hard sometimes. It's really hard. And I know that Nancy and Sarah and a lot of other people here know just how hard it is. And I appreciate so much what you all have done. And I wish Margaret were here so I could brag on her about the installation, because she did a remarkable job installing this show. And I'm so grateful for that. So thank you all so very, very much. And you should speak to Alice before you go about the conference that opens next weekend. It's going to be fabulous. It's about weaving, which is something I don't care very much about, but that's all right. It's still going to be great. There'll be some good speakers and some really interesting people there. So by all means, come to the conference and have a good time. You might meet somebody like Jason.
Yeah, very much so.
You might get like, so.
And, oh,
I do have a question.
Okay.
And it's kind of directed at you.
Me? Did she
My
say me?
point of view, it does seem like Connie is a real artist in this country in her consistent addressing of social issues through her art. You get around a lot more than I do. Am I wrong about this, that there aren't very many artists that deal with social issues in the direct and provocative way that she does?
well, Connie said this too. You're in your own words. I mean, you said it's risky. It's a risky thing. You can paint pretty pictures and have them sell, but to really, paint something that's gripping, that makes you ask a question. Sometimes people don't want. They don't want that. They don't want to see that. It's something that you don't want to have to be reminded of.
But it's not true in other countries. Other countries should see a lot of it.
Yeah. So I mean, Connie has really, you really set yourself on a very straight path. That the people that she was going to meet, the people that you were going to meet, the family that you were going to have, the experiences that they were going to the world that's going to, expose them to or press them into. It's a way of you being able to tell those stories. And just circling back on that, I think that, this is an incredible show that I feel as though needs to be in a very prominent place, that needs to be put into, that contemporary dialogue that has to do with the larger institutions. And that's another thing that I could go on and on and on about. I mean, it's the great thing about it is that Connie hasn't compromised on any level. And I see that a lot of young artists that do. They find that they've done something that can feed a market and they go that way. And then there's the stuff you don't show people. And I walked into Connie's studio the first time and I saw graves. And I will never think of Adam and Eve again with that portrait of the banana. I think this is a good place to stop. We can all visit with Connie, and there's some.
Can I say something?
Oh, sure, Ted. Yeah.
Thank you for your hard work and courage, and I wish that's why I wish I could just share you with the world. I mean, they really just what you're saying. Just thank you for inspiration over so many years and kindness. And I know you've done that for probably most of the people here and so many people that aren't here, but you're the fucking superhero.
Yes. Flowers and flames. Thank you everybody for joining. Thank you for the invitation. I want to thank my husband Norman who drove. I said I wouldn't have missed coming down to visit with Connie and talk about her work and be here to see this for the world. So thank you, Connie. All right, great.
Thanks, Jason.